Hey guys, today we are going to start looking at how to identify. Oh, this is Mike with the Worship-Based Workshop, but you knew that. We're going to start looking at how to identify notes just by listening to them. You know, last week we kind of chipped away all the things we didn't need for a song, and we just picked out the 1, 4, 5, and 6, the most familiar chord tones we're going to use. Well, today, or the most familiar chords, I should say. Today, we're going to look at how to start picking these out by using just our ears and some familiar songs. Let me give you a hint. All right? Okay, so go get your bass, come on back. Let's get to work. Okay, last week we talked about these scale tones we were using for the most common ones for worship songs, 1, 4, the 5, and the 6. And they were just the number of the notes in the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We just used the 1, the 4, the 5, and the 6. Now today we're going to really advance into knowing, just by listening to a song, discerning what each of those notes are. Okay, so if you hear a chord change, is that going from a 1 to a 4, a 1 to a 5? How do you know that? And what happens is you can actually learn a song while you're in your car on your way to worship practice, by the way. You can do it, really, but it just takes practice. It takes a lot of work. So the way we do this is, the way I've done it, and it's really helped me, is to use familiar songs, because you know the melodies in familiar songs. And you just don't know what kind of intervals you're listening to or what kind of intervals you're singing. But once you're able to define those, and you can relate those to some of the worship songs you're listening to. So if that doesn't make sense yet, give it some time. What I'm going to start off with is just a very simple song. I did it earlier, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And that song uses a 1-5 interval, 1, 5, and then 6. And the way you know that is 1, if we're doing it in G, 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? You hear that? If we use an open G, we could do. And then we go up to the 6. All right, so if you want to know what does a 1 to 5 interval sound like, then just sing Twinkle Twinkle. Twinkle, twinkle, bum, bum. Okay, that's how you will know that interval, by using that familiar song, knowing now that is a 1 to 5 interval, and you can just use it. What about a 1, 5, 6? Well, that's going to be used in some familiar worship songs, as you'll see. So it's 1, 5, 6, 5. Okay? So that is the first song we're going to look at in the first interval, just the 1 and the 5. And then we threw in a 6 there as well. All right, so we got this 1, 5, 6 interval that we just did with Twinkle Twinkle. And now that we know Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is a 1, 5 thing, then we could start recognizing a 1, 5 interval. Bum, 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 bum. That might sound familiar to you also in other places, okay? But what I want you to do is start looking at that in different keys. So we just did Twinkle Twinkle with an open G string. Okay, I'll try it with all the open strings. In D. And then A. And then E. Okay, so all of those, and the nice thing about it is, as many strings as you have, you can just do it off of the open strings. And get this 1, 5 interval familiar in your head. And then add the 6. The next thing is to sing it to yourself. Try to sing that 1, 5 interval. So when you're not, if you don't have your bass, think if you could sing it to yourself. Driving in your car, it's a good time to do some ear training. Try to work with the melodies and think about what they are. So if you hear this, maybe ask yourself, is that a 1, 5? You might hear this in another song. Okay, now let's apply this little interval we just did, this Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Now, let's listen to, or let's think about how this would work with another song, like how we're going to learn it in a worship song, okay? Let's go back to Lion and Lamb. We're in the key of B, all right? And the chorus is... Okay, so you have those notes. Let's see if we can figure this out. If you don't have, once again, you're on that desert island we talked about last week, and you have to learn Bethel Music's Lion and Lamb. Your worship leader put you out on a desert island. Isn't that nice? Yeah. So you hear that interval. Well, look what's happening here. And you don't know what the next, you know that this is a B, but you don't know how to go to those next two notes. You hear it, ba, ba. All right, you can maybe pick them out, maybe you can even sing them to yourself. But let's try this. So it's actually a 1, 5, and 6. Now, if you played that in the same rhythm as Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, same thing. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. So you see, it's just the rhythm that changes, but it's the same interval. And actually, with Bethel Music song here, with this Lion and Lamb, it's actually an octave lower. So, it's an F sharp, then a G sharp. So it's a 1, 5, an octave lower, and a 6, an octave lower. Okay? So I hope that helps with that 1, 5, 6 interval. So you want to try to do this with all the intervals eventually, but I'm just wanting to get you started with just the basics and some of the most common intervals here. So the next one is so what we have is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star works with the 1 and the 5, and then we also added the 6 to the 5. Okay, so just become familiar with that melody, which you already are probably, and then learn how those 1, 5, and 6 sound together in other keys. And then when you're listening to a song, start applying that. Is that maybe a 1, 5 interval? It happens a lot. So the next one we're going to look at is a 1 and 4. So a 1, 4 interval is this. If we're in the key of G again. All right. And a couple familiar songs there are, well, Amazing Grace. It's going to be kind of low. No, kind of high. Amen. All right. Amen. You hear that? How that goes? Amen. You're going from a 1 to a 4. So if you're in the key of G, that is a G to a C. So a couple things here. Knowing the intervals, the number intervals, and then knowing how those intervals relate to the actual notes. So if you are looking at a 1, 4 interval in the key of G, that is a G to a C. All right, so now you could be thinking about these things in your car. You could be thinking about these things when you're walking. You can eventually, once you get good at this, you can actually learn a song without even having your bass. And once you get to know that, it becomes pretty cool that you can actually be, see, here's the thing. You could be driving to church and learn all your songs so you don't have to mess with it at home. I'm kidding, don't do that. But it's possible, it is possible. All right, so you got your 1, 4 interval now. All right, now the cool thing here is Amazing Grace goes 1, 4, 6. So once again, you hear this relationship between the 1, the 4, and the 6. Sing grace. All right, so that's 1, 4, 6, 4, 6, which is pretty high for me, of course, but that's how that works. So you have 1, 4, 6. Now earlier with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and Lion and Lamb, we did a 1, 5, 6. Okay. The next one we can do is this 1, 3. This one is one you're going to hear. Okay. Okay. The major third. Okay. So we're talking about going from 1 to 3 in the major scale. I'm sorry, we're in G, so I'm going to play an octave up here to make it a little more easier on my ears there. All right, so the major third, first of all, it's a simple do, re, mi, right? But to go from the 1 to the 3, that's a familiar interval, and you'll hear it in songs like, oh, here's one that everybody knows if you've ever gone to Disney. It's a small world, right? It's a small world after all. That's a 2. So you can start figuring that out by just using the numbers. And if we're in the key of G, that 3 is going to be a G, A, B. So that's going to be a B. G, A, B, 1, 2, 3. It's a small world. Okay, and next, a familiar song we would sing in church is Amazing Grace. So you have the G to the B interval after the then the may zing is a 1 to 3 interval. It's a major third interval. Then another old spiritual that you might sing is Swing Low, Sweet Chariots. Swing low, sweet chariots, and then it goes down. But those first 4 notes are 1, 3, or 3, 1, 3, 1. Okay, so that will give you an idea of that major third interval. So there you have a major third interval already programmed into your head that you've learned from childhood or that you learned in church. And as long as you could sing those songs, then you could sing those intervals. What you just have to do now is identify it and recognize it. And apply it to another song. That's where it starts to get difficult. So it's good to learn these songs in different keys. Because if you can work through these songs in different keys and sing these intervals to yourself, then you'll start to be able to apply those to other songs, to other worship songs that you're going to learn. Whether it's a worship song or just a fun song that you're just trying to learn. So use these intervals and just recognize and identify them outside of those songs. So back to, we did Twinkle Twinkle Little Star for the 1 to 5. And we added the 6. 1, 5, 1, 5, 6, 5. And then we did the 4. And we used Amazing Grace there. But there's, by the way, the 1 to 4 also, Here Comes the Bride. Here comes the bride. All right, so that's a 1 to 4 interval. And if you could learn that anywhere else and apply that to different keys, then you can get that sing Here Comes the Bride if you want in all 12 keys. Here comes the bride. Then up to C. Here comes the bride. Then up to F. Here comes the bride. Using all the keys if you want. And just get to know that 1 to 4 interval. Do the same with the 1 to 5 interval. The 1 to 5, 6 interval. Do the same with the Swing Low, Sweet Chariots, or Amazing Grace, or It's a Small World, that 1 to 3, that major third interval. And when you get that, then you'll have these already programmed in your head, and then you could start listening to songs and say, I wonder what interval that is. I wonder what kind of a change that is. Are they going from a 1 to a 5, a 1 to a 6, or a 5 to a 6? You could start figuring these things out just by listening and recognizing these familiar melodies and these familiar intervals. This is how we get our ears trained. This is how we get, it's going to take some work, and it's going to take you some time to listen to a song and just take a section of that song and start using that and start, just one chord change from one chord to another. Try to figure out what it is. So before you even touch your bass, just try to guess. So you get it wrong. So it gets frustrating for about 5-10 minutes. Give it a try. This is how you're going to develop this. So I can, you can watch 100 videos on this, but until you start doing it, it really won't start to develop. So put the time in and give it a try. This will work. I'm going to throw in one more interval here, and that is the the minor third, because we deal with a lot of minor chords in all of our music. So a minor third interval is going to be, if we're in the key of G, if it's a G minor, then we're going to go G and then B flat. Okay, the major third interval was G and B. if we have a minor third interval, and it's a G and a B flat, okay? It's 4 frets away, all right? And the way we tell that, that's going to be a familiar interval. We go in different keys. All right. The familiar song with that is Hey Jude. So that's one that always kind of hits me. That's a familiar song to me, and one that will stay in my head, and I can use that forever. By the way, some of these songs you may not be as familiar with. You may not have them rolling in your head like I do, but there are songs that you do have. So if you have a familiar children's song or a familiar worship song that you always have in your head, those are the ones to use, the ones that are familiar to you. Find the intervals to those songs and start using those as your reference for learning new songs. Okay? So I hope this was helpful today, and I hope that you can just take some time. Next time you're in your car, listen to these songs, stop it after 2 chords, and see if you can figure out the intervals. All right? And by the way, if you haven't submitted to this channel, please do so. Love it when you guys do that. Until next time, this is Mike Brandenstein with the Worship Based Workshop, and I will see you soon.